In 1487, Leonardo da Vinci theorized a specialized armored vehicle way ahead of its time, and it was capable of destructive firepower. But the design had major flaws and a massive tonnage, and consequently, it never materialized. We're going to take that same design and power it with a steam engine. I'm going to attempt to solve a series of mechanical problems at the expense of the wrath of mechanical engineers. Apologies beforehand. And we're going to materialize this centuries-old design using the power of 3D. Let's get started. In Blender, we start modeling the machine, setting the base first and using simple shapes as a blockout structure for the wheels. And we can use booleans for cutouts in the base for the wheel's contact points with the ground. The idea is to make one wheel assembly first and replicate the construction of four sides using a mirror function. Using basic extrusions and bevels, we can convert a cylinder into the axle of the wheel. For the spokes, we can make another cylinder and distribute it radially using a radial array. If you can take a look at Da Vinci's sketch again, the wheels are driven by rotating these shafts, which rotate the small gear, and this gear drives the wheels using interlocking teeth. And to make the teeth, we're going to make another radial array and distribute cylinders along the circumference. Now, knowing the number of teeth is important, as this will help us figure out the gear ratio for proper interlocking. But we'll automate this process when we make the perfectly synced steam engine gear assembly just in a bit. We'll make the driving gear by arranging different size cylinders. To figure out the number of cylinders needed in the driving gear, we can divide the diameter of the smaller wheel with the diameter of the bigger wheel and multiply the resultant with the number of teeth in the larger wheel. Now we can just make a few support structures for the assembly and mirror this entire assembly on all four sides. Now here comes the first problem. In Da Vinci's design, the drive wheels are placed towards the center of the machine. If we then rotate the axle, both drive wheels will move in the same direction. But the resultant rotation of the main wheels will be in the opposite direction, rendering the machine useless. What can we do? Well, if we move one drive wheel on the other end of the main wheel, and now rotate the axle in the anti-clockwise direction, this drive wheel will move in the anti-clockwise direction as well, and with its interlocking teeth relayed an anti-clockwise motion as well. And same thing for the other wheel. We now have a viable mechanism that allows the machine to at least move. Good, we are getting somewhere. But now, the second problem is staring right at us. The average weight of one 24-pounder cannon is about 2200 kilos. Da Vinci's sketch has about 32 radial cannons. That is 70,400 kilos, or about 70 tons of weight, on top of the weight of the machine itself. And that is a lot of weight. Even one cannon was usually moved around by a horse. With only 4 to 5 people inside, they cannot possibly generate enough force to move that machine forwards. We need a bigger power source. I have to admit, I was tempted to install a nuclear reactor to power that thing, because why not? And that would be overkill, so I decided to power it with one of my favorite machines, the steam engine. But just before we progress further, it starts raining. So, take in the welcoming weather in the middle of the heat wave and the sounds of water droplets. Okay now, let's model the engine. We've made the engine, but we now need to rig the engine for function. And we'll do it with an inverse kinematics rig. We'll place a bone at the base of the piston cylinder, extrude another bone from it that spans the length of the piston itself, and a third bone that spans the length of the connecting rod. The control bone will be a vertical bone that meets the center of the crankshaft, and its rotation will control the movement of the piston. we need to have as less controllers as possible and make the system automatic. Ideally, just one controller for the entire assembly. And that will be this bone that will be driven by the position of the machine itself. We can have an IK constraint on the connecting rod bone, but even with an IK setup, it does not move like we intended to. Let's fix this. By selecting the root bone and going into its IK properties, we can dial up the IK stretch to its full capacity. And that makes the bone stretchy. This makes us one step closer to our intended movement. If we now just lock the rotation axis of the cylinder and the piston bone, we have our intended motion. If we parent this now to the respective meshes, we have a rigged engine ready to power the machine. Now the next bit is a third problem where I offend the engineers. We need a way to connect the engine with the wheels, similar to the workings of a car. But there is one key difference. The engine in a car mostly powers the front two wheels, but in our machine the engine will drive all four wheels by primarily powering the back wheels, which are connected with the front wheels by DaVinci's design. We could use differential gears, but I think I can make it simpler. We want to break the connection between the wheels by cutting the axle. So now the wheels on either side can move independently. We can then extend the crankshaft beyond the flywheel and we'll give it some gear placeholders. This is just to make the sizes right, and we'll replace these placeholders later on. The primary gear will be connected with another gear that changes the axis of rotation to 90 degrees. And we can have some big gears on each of the wheel shafts. We're getting there. We need to somehow connect these two sets of gears. And this will be another transmission shaft with 3 gears. The middle one will inherit the motion from the engine, and the shaft will transfer the motion to the gears on either side of this rod. And this transfer of motion will rotate the gears of the wheel shafts as well. There is one last problem though, the final boss. All of this setup has enabled us to move the machine with a powered setup. But the motion is only linear if you think about it, meaning it can only go forwards and backwards. There is no turning mechanism for the machine to turn right or left, and that is a massive handicap for a war machine for effective mobility. And this leaves us with a conundrum. All of this work for a machine that can't even turn. I thought about it for some time, but couldn't really find a way to turn this machine without breaking the entire thing apart. And I did want to preserve DaVinci's original design aesthetic. I was sitting idly, and then it hit me. I could turn it the way tracked vehicles like tanks turn. In order for a tank to turn, one of the tracks can be locked and the other moved. This pivots the tank in the median point of the locked track, and the tank turns towards the side of the locked track. We have the solution to our final problem. We can move this connecting rod such that one gear disengages from the bigger wheel gear, but the other one stays engaged. We're able to transmit the motion of the engine to only one side of the machine, effectively disabling and locking the other side. And this side will now be able to serve as a pivot point for the turn, and that could surprisingly work. This turning rod can have only one operator. If he moves it to the left and locks the right gear, it disengages the left side. Only the right side moves, turning the machine towards the left, and vice versa. We can now start to replace the gear placeholders with the real gears. Now, calculating gear ratios and number of teeth for every single gear for proper rotation conversion without slippage can be complicated, but there is a free website called Gear Generator, and it's amazing. We can put in the diameter of the gear from Blender in the pitch diameter here for all the gears, and that gives us a viable solution of the gear equation. We can now simply screenshot this solution, go inside Blender, and basically just use this as a reference to build the gear system from the native gear generator. Once set up, we can just replace the placeholders with this gear system. Now we can repeat this process for all the gears in the system that we made. To animate the gears automatically and precisely, we'll use drivers to drive the rotation of one gear from another. So we copy the Z rotation of the parent gear as a driver and paste it as a driver in the Z rotation of the child gear. Now the gears are rotating. but the teeth are not fitting as they should. What to do? Well, we fall back to some basic maths. We can change the type of driver to scripted expression and multiply the rotation with the ratio of the number of teeth of parent and the child. And now it fits perfectly. And we can replicate this process to the entire assembly. This way, the rotation of only one gear moves the entire system. And if you parent it to the movement of the engine piston, the engine effectively moves the entire system, and everything fits beautifully together. What is now left is to make the bottom planks, the main armament, which is the cannon array, and the top canopy made of ballistic glass. We can then take the entire model into Substance Painter to hand paint the textures. The bottom part accumulates dirt and is a bit dark, and the top part is worn out by continuous smoke from the burning coal. It's all come together. It's alive. If you want the model and the files, they're all available on my Patreon, so feel free to go there. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a thing or two. I'll see you in the next one. Farewell.